not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
Alright guys, so we're going to start with stats like we usually do. I went to 150 like I normally do because that's the organic place that I think most people end the game. So with Vigor, we're always going to get as close as we can to the soft cap, especially on these beginner friendly builds. So I went 55, you can change it as needed. Mind, I didn't feel like I needed any mind, so I didn't push mind. Endurance, I went to 32 to give us enough endurance to use some decent armor. We'll get more into armor later. Strength, I went 17 because that was what was required to use some of the other weapons in this build. The dexterity I went to 50 because that is our primary damage scaling stat on these weapons, and we'll get more into that later. Intelligence we leave at 9 because we don't need it on this build. Faith we take to 15 so we can use Flame Grant Me Strength. If you don't want to use Flame Grant Me Strength, then leave your Faith at base. Arcane we went to 45 because we're a bleed build and bleed scales off of Arcane. We'll get more into that in a little bit as well. So while you're leveling and you can't quite meet these stat requirements, I want you to take just these points away from this. That Vigor is important because it keeps you alive, that's your health pool. Endurance is nice because it gives you more stamina and allows you to use heavier armor. And Dexterity and Arcane are your damage stats, you want to keep them fairly equal leveling up. Alright guys, so let's talk weapons. On this build, the weapon that we're using is the Scavenger's Curved Sword. We're using this for a couple reasons. The main reason that we chose this weapon is because of the attack speed. There's a lot of videos going around right now using these weapons incorrectly. They're using it for the jump build like my 3-in-1 twin blade setup, and it's because of a lack of knowledge on game mechanics, I think, because you can much better utilize these for chaining attacks, and I'll get more into that and showcase that later on. The big takeaway here is that power stancing these curved swords have an extremely fast moveset. So we're trading raw AR, as you can see on the top right of the screen here. We're only doing 434 damage raw with a plus 25 Scavenger's Curved Sword for a lot more speed to put that damage out much faster. You can also see that we've traded a little bit of Bloodlust buildup down to 108 for the same purpose of being able to put out more attacks and put out more Bloodlust buildup on a chain. I'll cover the mechanics further later, but also note that Seppuku is very important as the Ash of War on these swords. Now I like to run the Dragon Communion Seal on bleed builds because it has 0 weight and it provides all the necessities that we need it for, really for just Flame Grant Me Strength, or if you wanted to throw in some bleed incantations. We get a 277 incant scaling, we'd add no weight to our build. It's definitely worth getting. As always, if you don't know where it is, head over to my site to the item locations. I've got a link to a quick guide video for it. Okay, so getting into armor. On a bleed build, we always want the white mask because every time you proc a bleed, you get 10% more damage. And since using Seppuku procs a bleed, and every time you hit someone you're proccing a bleed, you're basically getting a permanent 10% damage from this helmet. There's no reason to use anything else. If you're not sure how to get it, once again, head over to the website, the item locations. You can search for it. I have a walkthrough video telling you exactly how to get it. The cool thing about this setup is the Scavenger's Curved Swords only weigh 3.5 pounds, so with the combined 7 pounds of total weapon weight, because the Dragon Communion Seal weighs nothing, we get a lot more weight to throw at our armor, so we get to wear Veteran's Armor, which is one of the best defensive armors in the game. It's just very heavy, but we can stay on our medium roll with this build and utilize a heavy armor like Veterans to get some poise and some serious defense. With your gauntlets being a little bit less important, I prefer to go with the lighter weight stuff here, like Ronin's. And Ronin's is probably best in slot for most of the light to medium weight armor slots in the game. So the Bullgoat set is the best armor set in the game in terms of poise, all-around defense. It's just extremely heavy, but again, because we have such light weapons, we can take advantage of that available equipment load and use the Bullgoat Greaves to add a lot of poise and defense to our build. Getting into Talismans, the Lord of Blood's Exaltation is a great way to start because it's a staple in every bleed build. You should always have this in every bleed build that you run because it gives you basically a permanent 20% more damage. This is, every time you proc a bleed, you get 20% damage. You're proccing bleeds almost every time you hit someone, and on top of that, every time that you use Seppuku, you get the 20% increase, so there's no reason to not have this in a bleed build. Runwing Sword Insignia is incredible for this build because of the attack speed and the amount of attacks that you're going to be putting out in short times. You'll almost always be at that end cap of 13% more damage. So I highly recommend that you use the Runwing Sword Insignia in this build. If you had to choose between this and Millicent's, this would be the priority. Now, since you have to go into New Game Plus to run dual Scavenger's Curve Swords, unless you have a friend meal them for you, you're also going to have the opportunity to grab a Millicent's Prosthesis on top of your Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. This is a great option for the same reason the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia was, in that we're attacking so much that the successive attacks cap of 11% on this will almost always be met, so we'll almost permanently be doing 11% more damage with this. For the last talisman slot, I highly recommend that you grab the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. This is the equivalent in damage reduction of almost an entire set of armor. A pretty good entire set of armor, actually. On this build, for example, we have an extremely high physical damage negation because of the amount of armor that we can wear. And this talisman gives us an additional 50% of the physical defense that that armor provides. So let's take a look here. If we don't have this talisman on, we're averaging about 31 physical damage negation. If you look at the defense section, for physical versus strike / pierce, the average there, we go from 31 to about 45 on average. So we're seeing almost a 50% increase, and that's huge on an aggressive build like this, so it's definitely worth using. When it comes to your flask, you have a lot of flexibility in one of your tiers, and the other one I feel like is mandatory. In this build, because of the successive attacks that we're doing and how many and how fast we're doing them, I highly recommend use the Thorny Crack tier. Because of how fast we attack, we'll almost always be at the 20% maximum increase that this provides. Very similar to the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis. So a near permanent 20% increase in damage is a must-have. As for the other tier, I like the Dexterity Knot Crystal tier if you want to squeeze a little bit more damage because of the dex scaling on the weapons, but you can go anything here. There are so many options. If you want to go something more defensive, it's really 100% up to you. I'll just reiterate one more time that Seppuku is extremely important, and you want to duplicate it and have it on both swords. The only incantation I'm going to mention for this build is Flame Grant Me Strength. It has a very low 15 faith requirement, and it gives you 20% more physical damage for 30 seconds. Let's take a look at the moveset of Scavenger's Curve Swords when they're power stance, and you can see right away on the running attack, the attack speed is incredible, and the running attack hits 4 times. So that's a lot of bleed procs. So when I saw that video of these weapons being misused as basically a jump attack weapon, I really want to clear up the mechanics for you guys on what makes this strong and why this is not the weapon you want to be using for the jump attack build like my twin blade build. The jump attack moveset is similar, you see, but here's the important difference. Look at the raw damage on the Scavenger's Curve Sword, and you see it only does 434 damage, and it only has a blood loss buildup of 108, as opposed to the Godskin Peeler, which we can look at and see it has 132 blood loss buildup and 502 raw damage. This is a very significant increase of almost 25% more raw damage and 25% more blood loss buildup on the Peeler, or really any twin blade, which is why the twin blade setup on my jump attack variant of my 3-in-1 bleed build was set up that way. If you think about the basic mechanics of it, if you're doing a jump attack and something that's hitting slower and harder, you want something that does the most damage and has the most blood loss buildup as you're putting it out less amount of times in the amount of seconds that you have. Whereas the strong suit of the Scavenger's Curve Sword is the extremely fast L1 attacks and being able to chain multiple attacks extremely fast with a regular power stance L1 attack. And this is why you have to be very careful when you pick a video or a channel that you're going to devote 10, 20, 30, 40 hours of playthrough to following their guide. You need to make sure that that channel knows the mechanics of the game and that they're not just copy pasting guides out there and changing it up a little bit with no real knowledge of the foundation of the mechanics of the build, because then they're misleading you into a build that's extremely suboptimal, and then you find out 30 hours in and now you're upset. Luckily, this one you could salvage by going and picking up some twin blades, but that's not always the case with a lot of these builds. So let me make this clear. I'm not here bashing every content creator on Elden Ring, because there are a lot of really good, really knowledgeable content creators that put a lot of work and effort into their builds. There's also a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of big channels that are copy-pasting crap and have no idea what they're talking about. So what I'm simply saying to you is, just do your homework. Just make sure that before you devote 10, 20, 30 hours of your life into a build following a guide on a channel, just make sure they know what they're talking about. Look at their videos. Are they trying to just clickbait people into getting views, or do they put out content and they actually look like they know what they're doing? So to wrap this up, I'm going to say, I know that some of you are wondering, hey, how do I get these items, stuff like that. I've covered it quickly in the guide, but a lot of you are wondering why I don't put those locations in my guides, because I value your time, and a lot of you guys, because you have to remember that there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that watch these videos, and I have to account for all of you. And some of you guys are going to know where a lot of this stuff is, and so I'm doing you the favor of not putting in an additional 5 minutes into my video of just walking to item locations. And what I did instead was I went and created an entire website for you guys that you can easily go and navigate all the content, and I made a page specifically for item locations where you can just go into a table, type in the item that you're looking for. If you only need to look up 2 items from the build, whatever, you go and look them up in that table, and it has a link right there directly to the quick guide video on my YouTube channel. So now you can use the website, you can use the channel, you can do it however you want, but I have all these location guides for you guys. I just value your time, and that's why I don't pad these videos with 5-10 more minutes of item location guides that I've already made accessible for you guys on the website. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I'm currently working on another early game build that's pretty cool, so I hope you guys are excited for that. I know a lot of you guys really like the early game stuff. I just try to mix it up and throw in some end game stuff as well. So keep an eye out in the next day or two. I'll try to keep you guys updated. And those of you that have been around the channel know that I don't ever beg for likes, subs, any of that. But we are going to start streaming on Twitch again soon. So if you guys are interested in some of that stuff, because there's been a lot of comments and a lot of questions around the Discord server and on here on would I be willing to stream. So I am going to start streaming. I'm going to do mostly viewer interactive stuff at first. I'm going to do stuff like correcting your builds or answering questions. So we'll start off small and go from there. So if you are wanting to see that, as much as it kills me to say this, you probably should follow on Twitch, because I'm only going to be live while I'm live, and that's probably the only way you'll be notified that I am live. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
I'm not fucking leaving!